Marcus Blackwell grabbed his wife by the throat and slammed her against the dining room wall. 25 investors watched in frozen silence as champagne glasses trembled in their hands. "You worthless piece of trash," he hissed, his fingers tightening. "You just cost me $80 million. He dragged her across the marble floor toward the front door while she clawed at his hands, gasping for air. What Marcus didn't know was that in exactly 3 minutes, a man with enough power to erase his entire existence would walk through that door and say 4 words that would destroy everything. "She is my wife." Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The sound of Emma's body hitting the wall silenced every conversation in the room. Marcus Blackwell's hand was wrapped around her throat, his designer watch glinting under the chandelier light as his fingers pressed deeper into her skin. His face was inches from hers, twisted into something inhuman, a mask of pure, unfiltered rage. "You stupid, worthless woman," he snarled. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Emma couldn't answer. She couldn't breathe. Her hands clawed uselessly at his wrist, her feet barely touching the ground as he pinned her against the wall. 25 of the city's most powerful investors sat frozen at the dinner table. Forks hovered over plates. Wine glasses stopped halfway to lips. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. This was Marcus Blackwell's house. Marcus Blackwell's party. And clearly, Marcus Blackwell's wife, to do with as he pleased. "Marcus." The voice came from the head of the table. Harrison Cole, chairman of Cole Capital Ventures, the man Marcus had spent 3 years courting for an $80 million investment. "Perhaps we should—" "Shut up, Harrison." Marcus didn't even turn around. His eyes stayed locked on Emma's face, watching her skin turn red, then purple. "This is between me and my wife." He released her suddenly. Emma crumpled to the floor, gasping, her hands flying to her bruised throat. She sucked in air like a drowning woman breaking the surface. Marcus straightened his tie. He smoothed back his hair. When he turned to face his guests, his expression had already shifted. Controlled, apologetic, the charming CEO once again. "I apologize for that display," he said smoothly. "Emma has mental health issues. Severe ones. I've tried to shield her from public situations, but tonight she insisted on attending and, well," he gestured at her crumpled form. "You can see the result." Emma pushed herself up onto her knees. Her voice came out as a rasp. "I didn't do anything. I just answered his question." "She's delusional," Marcus cut her off, his tone dripping with practiced sympathy. "The doctors say it's a form of psychosis. She invents scenarios in her head and believes they're real." Harrison Cole shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "What exactly happened, Marcus?" "She told you my expansion projections were lies." Marcus laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "In front of everyone. She said I was hiding debt, that the company was failing. None of it's true, of course. She doesn't have access to any financial information. She doesn't have access to anything. I keep her isolated for her own protection." Emma struggled to her feet, using the wall for support. "I didn't say that. He asked me what I thought about the expansion, and I said I didn't know anything about it. That's all I said. I swear that's all." "You see?" Marcus spread his hands, appealing to his guests. "She can't even remember what happened 5 minutes ago. This is what I deal with, every single day." A woman at the far end of the table, Vanessa Moore, Marcus's chief financial officer, let out a delicate sigh. She was beautiful in a sharp, predatory way, her red dress clinging to her figure, her dark hair cascading over bare shoulders. "Poor Marcus," Vanessa said, her voice carrying just loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't know how you manage." She really shouldn't be allowed in public. Several guests murmured in agreement. A few shot pitying glances at Marcus. Nobody looked at Emma. Emma's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. 4 years. 4 years of this. 4 years of being told she was crazy, being told she was worthless, being told she was lucky Marcus had saved her from the streets. She didn't remember anything before Marcus. Her first memory was waking up in a hospital bed in Lyon, France, with no name, no past, no identity. The doctor said she'd been found by hikers near a river, half drowned, with severe head trauma. She'd been in a coma for 3 weeks. Marcus had been there when she woke up. A volunteer at the hospital, he'd said. He'd held her hand and told her everything would be okay. He'd given her a name, Emma, and a story. He'd told her she was an orphan with no family, no friends, nothing. He'd told her he would take care of her. And she'd believed him. What choice did she have? She was a blank slate, a woman without a past, completely dependent on the kindness of strangers. Marcus had seemed so kind back then. The kindness had lasted exactly until their wedding night. The first time he'd hit her, she'd been so shocked she couldn't even cry. He'd apologized afterward, blamed stress, promised it would never happen again. It happened again, and again, and again. But the physical violence was almost easier to bear than the psychological torture. Marcus had spent 4 years systematically dismantling her sense of self. He controlled what she wore, what she ate, who she spoke to. He told her she was stupid, clumsy, useless. He told her she couldn't cook, couldn't clean, couldn't do anything right. He'd forbidden her from playing piano after hearing her practice once, claiming the sound gave him migraines. She'd tried to leave once, 2 years ago. She'd made it as far as the front gate before Marcus's security team had brought her back. That night, he'd explained very calmly what would happen if she ever tried to leave again. She hadn't tried since. Now she stood in his dining room, throat bruised, dignity shattered, while 25 strangers looked at her like she was something scraped off the bottom of a shoe. "Marcus, please." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I'm sorry. Please don't." "Don't what?" Marcus walked toward her slowly, deliberately. His guests watched in fascination, like spectators at a blood sport. "Don't tell the truth about you? Don't let these people see what you really are?" He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the same spot he'd bruised last week. Emma whimpered but didn't pull away. She'd learned that pulling away only made it worse. "You want to know the truth?" Marcus addressed the room, his voice rising. "I found this woman in a French hospital 5 years ago. She was a nobody, a Jane Doe with no memory, no family, no future. She would have rotted in that hospital for the rest of her life." He shook Emma like a rag doll. "I gave her a name. I gave her a home. I gave her everything she has. And this?" He gestured at her with disgust. "This is how she repays me? By embarrassing me in front of the most important investors of my career?" "I didn't mean to," Emma sobbed. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this." Marcus started dragging her toward the foyer. "Sorry doesn't give me back my reputation. Sorry doesn't close this deal." Harrison Cole stood up. "Marcus, perhaps this isn't the time." "Sit down, Harrison." Marcus's voice cracked like a whip. "I'll handle my household, and then we'll continue our discussion like civilized people." He hauled Emma through the dining room, past the watching eyes, past Vanessa's smug smile, past the servants who'd learned long ago to look the other way. Emma stumbled, her heel catching on the Persian rug. She fell hard onto her knees on the marble floor. Marcus didn't stop. He kept dragging her, her knees scraping against the stone, leaving smears of blood in their wake. "Please," Emma begged. "Marcus, please, I'll do anything." "You'll do what you're told." He reached the front door and threw it open. The storm hit them like a physical force. Rain poured down in sheets, driven sideways by a howling wind. Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by thunder that shook the windows. "No!" Emma's eyes went wide with terror. "Marcus, no! Please, it's freezing. I have nothing. No coat, no phone, no money." "Not my problem anymore." Marcus grabbed her by the back of her dress and shoved her through the doorway. Emma stumbled down the stone steps, her heels snapping off, and sprawled onto the wet driveway. The rain soaked her instantly, plastering her hair to her face, turning her simple gray dress, the only nice thing Marcus allowed her to own, into a sodden rag. She scrambled to her knees, looking up at her husband, silhouetted in the doorway. The warm, golden light from inside framed him like a halo of false comfort. "Marcus!" She reached toward him, rain and tears streaming down her face. "Please! Where am I supposed to go? I don't have anyone." "Should have thought of that before you decided to ruin my life." Marcus's voice was ice. "I'll have divorce papers sent to whatever homeless shelter takes you in. Or maybe I won't bother. Maybe I'll just let you disappear." "I'll die out here!" Emma screamed. "Is that what you want? You want me to die?" Marcus smiled. It was a terrible smile. Cold, satisfied, final. "Frankly, Emma, I don't care what happens to you." You stopped being useful the moment you opened your mouth in front of Harrison Cole. He stepped back into the house. "Wait, please! I'm begging you!" The door slammed shut with a sound like a coffin lid closing. Emma heard the lock click into place. Then another lock. Then the deadbolt. She was alone. She knelt there on the driveway as the storm raged around her, the rain washing the blood from her scraped knees, mixing with the tears on her face. The cold seeped into her bones within seconds, a vicious, biting freeze that made her whole body shake. She looked up at the house. Through the dining room windows, she could see Marcus walking back to his guests, straightening his jacket, smiling. She saw him pick up a wine glass. She saw Vanessa stand up and walk toward him, placing a hand on his arm. They were already laughing. 4 years of marriage, 4 years of servitude, 4 years of abuse. And they were laughing. Emma wanted to scream. She wanted to pound on the door until her fists bled. She wanted to burn the whole house down. Instead, she just knelt there in the rain, shaking, broken, with nowhere to go. The Blackwell estate was located in Kingswood Heights, one of the most exclusive gated communities in the state. High walls, security cameras, iron gates. No buses, no taxis, no help. Emma forced herself to stand. Her legs felt like rubber, her whole body trembling with cold and shock. She wrapped her arms around herself, a futile gesture against the driving rain, and started walking toward the main gate. Every step felt like she was walking through quicksand. The driveway seemed to stretch forever, a river of gravel and puddles that sucked at her broken shoes. She reached the gate after what felt like hours. The security booth was empty. Marcus must have sent the guard away before his party. The iron gate was locked, but there was a pedestrian gap just wide enough for her to squeeze through. She stumbled out onto the main road and immediately had to jump back as a car sped past, spraying her with dirty water. The driver honked aggressively, not even slowing down. Emma stood on the side of the road, soaked to the bone, bleeding, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. She looked left. She looked right. Nothing but dark road and sheets of rain in both directions. She had no phone to call for help. Marcus had taken it away years ago. She had no money. Marcus controlled every cent. She had no friends. Marcus had isolated her from everyone. She had no family, or at least none that she knew of. She was completely, utterly alone. Emma sank down onto the grass verge, her legs giving out. She curled into a ball, trying to conserve whatever warmth she had left, knowing it was useless. Hypothermia would set in within the hour. Maybe that was for the best. God, she whispered into the storm, her voice carried away by the wind. If you're listening, please, just let it end. I can't do this anymore. Please, just let it end. She closed her eyes, ready to surrender to the cold. That's when she saw the lights. Not ordinary headlights. These were different, crisp, brilliant white beams that cut through the rain like lasers. They approached slowly, deliberately, with a sense of purpose that seemed almost predatory. Emma's survival instinct kicked in despite everything. She tried to scramble to her feet, to get away, to hide. But her body wouldn't cooperate. She could only watch as the vehicles drew closer. 3 of them. 2 black Range Rovers flanking a massive Bentley Mulsanne, a car that exuded quiet, old-money power. The convoy slowed as it approached her. Then it stopped. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Who were these people? What did they want? In her experience, powerful men in expensive cars were never good news. The rear door of the Bentley opened before the vehicle had even fully stopped. A driver in a chauffeur's uniform stepped out with an umbrella, moving with military precision. But Emma barely noticed him. Her attention was fixed on the man who emerged from the back seat. He was tall, silver-haired, probably in his late 70s, but carrying himself with the vigor of someone decades younger. He wore a heavy wool overcoat over a tuxedo, and he leaned on a cane topped with a gold lion's head. His face was lined with age, but his eyes, sharp, piercing blue, burned with an intensity that made Emma's breath catch. He didn't look like a man who got out in the rain. He looked like a man who commanded the rain to stop. The old man walked toward her, ignoring his chauffeur's attempts to hold the umbrella over him. He let the rain soak his expensive coat as if it didn't exist. His eyes were locked on her face. Eleanor. His voice was gravel and authority, but it trembled on the name. My God. Eleanor. Emma shrank back, pressing herself against the wet grass. I don't know you. My name is Emma. Emma Blackwell. Please, I don't have any money. I don't... The old man stopped 2 feet away from her. Up close, she could see his face cycling through emotions. Shock, disbelief, joy, and then a terrible, cold fury as his eyes traveled over her injuries. He saw the bruises on her throat. He saw the blood on her knees. He saw the way she flinched away from him, the way her whole body trembled with more than just cold. What has he done to you? The old man whispered. His voice cracked on the words. What has that monster done to you? Please. Emma was crying now, though she couldn't tell the difference between tears and rain. I don't understand. I don't know who Eleanor is. I don't know who you are. Please, just leave me alone. The old man knelt. He didn't care about the mud ruining his trousers. He reached out with warm, gloved hands and gently cupped her face. You don't remember me, he said softly. A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. He told me you were dead. He cashed my checks for 5 years while telling me you had died in the accident. What accident? Emma asked, her voice barely audible. What checks? I don't understand anything you're saying. Richard Sterling, the old man said. The name came out like a curse. Emma's blood ran cold. That's not... My husband's name is Marcus Blackwell. The old man's expression hardened into something terrifying. Marcus Blackwell. Richard Sterling. He's used a dozen names over the years. I've spent 5 years tracking his aliases. I never thought... His voice broke. I never thought I'd find you alive. Who are you? Emma whispered. The old man stood, drawing himself up to his full height. He looked up the hill toward the Blackwell mansion, where the lights still blazed, where Marcus was probably raising another toast to his own success. "My name is William Ashford," he said. "I am the chairman of Ashford Holdings. I own more real estate than most countries. I have spent 5 years and $100 million searching for my wife." He looked back down at Emma, his blue eyes burning. "Who died in a car accident in Switzerland. Or so I was told." "Your wife?" Emma repeated numbly. I can't be." "Your name is Eleanor Ashford." William's voice was firm now, steady. "You are 52 years old, though you don't look a day over 40. We were married 23 years ago in Vienna. You speak 4 languages, you play piano like an angel, and you are the love of my life." He reached into his coat and pulled out an old photograph, laminated to protect it from the elements. He held it out to her. Emma looked at the picture. It showed William, 20 years younger, standing next to a woman who looked exactly like her. Same hazel eyes, same face shape, same slight smile. But that woman looked happy. That woman looked confident. That woman looked like someone who had never been afraid in her life. "I don't remember," Emma said. "I don't remember any of this." "You had severe head trauma from the crash," William explained gently. "Amnesia, complete memory loss. That's why Marcus, or whatever his real name is, targeted you. He saw a vulnerable woman with no memory and no identity. He saw an opportunity." Emma's mind was reeling. It couldn't be true. It was too incredible, too convenient, too much like a fairy tale. And Emma had learned long ago that fairy tales weren't real. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked. "How do I know you're not just another man who wants to use me?" William's face softened with infinite sadness. "You don't," he said simply. "You have no reason to trust me. But I can prove everything I've said. I have medical records, DNA tests, photographs, wedding certificates. I have a house full of servants who wept when you disappeared and will weep again when they see you alive." He held out his hand. "Come with me, Eleanor. Let me take you somewhere warm and safe. Let me show you who you really are. And if you decide you don't believe me," he swallowed hard, "I will have my driver take you anywhere you want to go, and I will never bother you again." Emma looked at his hand. Then she looked back at the mansion on the hill, where her husband, her jailer, was celebrating her absence. She thought about the 4 years of abuse, the isolation, the degradation, the constant grinding cruelty that had worn her down to nothing. She thought about how Marcus had just thrown her into a storm to die. She took William's hand. His grip was warm and steady. He helped her to her feet and guided her toward the Bentley, wrapping his own coat around her shoulders. "James," William called to the head of his security detail, "we're going back to the house." "Sir?" James hesitated. "We're just leaving?" William's expression darkened. He looked up at the Blackwell mansion one more time. "No," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "We're not leaving. We're just beginning." He helped Emma into the back of the Bentley, settling her into the heated leather seat. A cashmere blanket appeared from somewhere, along with a thermos of hot tea. "Drink," William said gently. "Warm up. You're safe now." Emma wrapped her hands around the thermos, absorbing its heat. She was still shaking, still confused, still terrified. But for the first time in 4 years, she felt something else, too. Hope. William sat down beside her and closed the door. He tapped on the partition separating them from the driver. "Turn the convoy around," he ordered. "We're going back to the Blackwell estate." Emma's eyes widened. "What? No, we can't. Marcus will—" "Marcus Blackwell has been stealing from me for 5 years," William said calmly. He's been cashing monthly checks I sent to support my late wife's medical fund. A fund I established because I couldn't bear to close it, even after you were declared dead. He's been using that money to finance his lifestyle while keeping you prisoner in his house." His blue eyes met hers. "Tonight, he threw my wife into a storm and told her to die in a gutter." William's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. "Tonight, I am going to teach Marcus Blackwell what happens when you steal from the Ashford family." The Bentley's engine roared to life. The convoy turned around. Through the rain-streaked window, Emma watched the lights of the Blackwell mansion growing larger as they climbed the hill. Inside that house, Marcus Blackwell was probably making another toast, probably laughing with Vanessa, probably congratulating himself on finally getting rid of his problem. He had no idea what was coming. He had no idea that in exactly 3 minutes the doors would fly open and the man he had been stealing from for 5 years would walk in with enough power to destroy his entire existence. He had no idea that 4 simple words were about to end his world. "She is my wife." The convoy stopped at the iron gates of the Blackwell estate. James, the head of security, stepped out of the lead Range Rover and approached the intercom. He pressed the button and waited. A crackle of static, then a bored voice. "Blackwell residents, state your business." "Open the gate," James said flatly. "I'm sorry, sir, but Mr. Blackwell is hosting a private event. No uninvited guests." "Open the gate," James repeated, "or we will open it for you." A pause, then a nervous laugh. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is private property and—" William's voice came through James's earpiece. "Enough." James stepped back. He signaled to the driver of the lead Range Rover. The massive vehicle reversed 20 feet, then surged forward. The iron gates, hand-forged, imported from Italy, worth more than most people's houses, crumpled like aluminum foil. The lock shattered. The gates swung open with a screech of tortured metal. The convoy rolled through without slowing down. Emma pressed herself against the leather seat, her heart pounding. "He'll call the police. Marcus will have us all arrested." William turned to look at her. In the dim light of the car, his face was carved from stone. "My dear," he said softly, "I own the company that provides security systems to every police station in this state. The chief of police plays golf at my country club. The district attorney's daughter interned at my foundation last summer." He reached over and patted her hand. "Marcus Blackwell can call whoever he likes. No one is coming to save him." The Bentley pulled up to the front entrance. Through the rain-streaked windows, Emma could see the warm glow spilling from the dining room. She could see shadows moving inside. Marcus's guests, still eating, still drinking, still celebrating, still completely unaware. "Stay in the car," William said. "You're shaking. You need warmth." "No." Emma surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "I'm not hiding anymore. I want to see his face." William studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "James," he said into his earpiece, "breach the front entrance. Secure all exits. No one leaves until I say so." The security team moved like shadows. 8 men in tactical black, spreading out around the house, taking positions at every door and window. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was weapon enough. 2 of them approached the front door. They didn't knock. The door exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Oak splinters scattered across the marble foyer. The sound echoed through the house like a bomb detonating. Emma heard screams from inside. A woman's shriek, the clatter of silverware, breaking glass. William stepped out of the Bentley. He didn't hurry. He walked toward the shattered doorway with the measured pace of a man who had all the time in the world. his cane tapping against the wet stone steps. Emma followed, clutching his coat around her shoulders. Her legs were unsteady, her whole body still trembling with cold and shock. But something else was burning in her chest now, something that felt almost like anger. They entered the house together. The dining room was chaos. Marcus's guests had leaped to their feet, knocking over chairs, spilling wine. Several women were screaming. The men were shouting, demanding to know what was happening, threatening to call lawyers and police and private security. Marcus himself stood at the head of the table, his face the color of old milk. His carefully constructed composure had shattered, along with his front door. "What the hell is this?" he screamed. "Who are you people? I'll have you all thrown in prison. He stopped mid-sentence. He had seen Emma. For a fraction of a second, pure terror flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the smooth mask he wore so well. "Emma!" His voice shifted to concern, dripping with false sweetness. "Sweetheart, you're back. Thank God. I was so worried about you." He started walking toward her, arms outstretched. "I was just about to send someone to look for you. The storm, and your condition." "Stop!" William's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Marcus froze. He turned to look at the old man, really look at him for the first time. Emma watched her husband's expression cycle through confusion, then recognition, then something approaching genuine fear. "Do I know you?" Marcus asked carefully. William walked forward until he stood directly in front of Marcus. Despite his age, despite his cane, he seemed to tower over the younger man. "You don't remember me," William said, "but I remember you. Or should I say," he pulled a photograph from his pocket and held it up. "I remember Richard Sterling, the volunteer orderly at St. Jude's Hospital in Lyon, France. The man who saw my wife lying in a hospital bed with no memory and decided to steal her." The room went absolutely silent. Marcus laughed, a high, nervous sound. "I have no idea what you're talking about. My name is Marcus Blackwell. I've never been to France in my life. This woman," he pointed at Emma, "is my wife. We've been married for 4 years. I have the certificate to prove it." "Oh, I'm sure you do." William's voice was ice. "You've always been thorough with your paperwork. The forged medical records, the fake background you created for Emma, the marriage license you obtained before she could remember who she really was." He stepped closer to Marcus. "Tell me, how much did you skim from my monthly transfers? Was it worth it?" Vanessa Moore stood up from her seat at the table. Her face had gone pale beneath her makeup. "Marcus," she said sharply, "what is he talking about? What monthly transfers?" "Nothing," Marcus's voice cracked. "He's insane. This is some kind of—" "5 years ago," William interrupted, addressing the room, "my wife and I were in a car accident in Switzerland. I was pulled from the wreckage. She was swept away by a river. Her body was never found." He held up the photograph again, the picture of himself and Eleanor, young and happy and in love. "I established a medical trust in her name. Even after she was declared dead, I couldn't bear to close it. Every month, I sent a check to the trust administrator, a man named Richard Sterling, who claimed to be managing her estate." William's eyes locked onto Marcus. "For 5 years, you cashed those checks. For 5 years, you told me my wife was dead while keeping her prisoner in your house." "That's a lie," Marcus shouted. I don't know anyone named—" "My investigators traced every check," William continued calmly. "Every deposit, every withdrawal. The money went into an account registered to Marcus Blackwell. Same social security number, same bank, same signature." He pulled out another document, a stack of papers thick enough to be a novel. "This is the report. Bank records, wire transfers. Your real identity documents from before you changed your name. William dropped the papers onto the dining table with a heavy thud. Would you like to see what else my investigators found? Or should we skip to the part where I discuss your company's financial situation with Mr. Cole? Harrison Cole, the investor Marcus had spent years courting, stepped forward. His face was a storm of confusion and fury. What is he talking about, Marcus? What financial situation? Nothing. Marcus was sweating now, dark patches spreading under his arms. Harrison, this man broke into my house. He's clearly deranged. We should call. I had my forensic accountants examine Nexus Technologies, William said to Harrison. Would you like to know what they found? Harrison's jaw tightened. Tell me. The company is bankrupt. Has been for 18 months. The expansion projections Marcus showed you are fabrications. The quarterly reports are doctored. The offshore accounts, William smiled coldly. Well, let's just say the SEC would be very interested in those offshore accounts. That's not true, Marcus screamed. I built that company from nothing. It's worth exactly $0. William cut him off. You've been moving money in circles, creating the illusion of growth while siphoning funds into personal accounts. You need Mr. Cole's $80 million to avoid criminal prosecution. Without it, you'll be in prison by the end of the year. Harrison Cole's face had turned a shade of purple, usually reserved for cardiac patients. He turned to Marcus with murderous eyes. Is this? You want the truth? Yes, I took the money. Yes, I married her for the connection to the Ashford fortune. Yes, I've been waiting for 5 years for this brain-damaged invalid to remember enough to give me access to her trust fund. Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. But none of that matters, Marcus continued, jabbing a finger at William. Because legally, she's my wife, not yours. I married her. I have the certificate. I have 4 years of shared residence, shared finances, shared everything. Whatever she was before, he sneered at Emma. She's been Emma Blackwell for 4 years. The courts will side with me. Interesting theory. William reached into his coat and pulled out one more document. Except for one small problem. He unfolded the paper and held it up. Eleanor Ashford was never declared legally dead. The Swiss authorities classified her as missing, not deceased. Our marriage was never annulled. William's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Which means your marriage to her is void. It never legally existed. You didn't marry Eleanor Ashford, Marcus. You committed bigamy, and bigamy is a felony. The color drained from Marcus's face. No, he breathed. That's not. You can't. I can, and I have. William pulled out his phone. I've already filed the paperwork. I've already contacted the FBI regarding the wire fraud. I've already sent the forensic accounting report to the SEC. He smiled, a cold, terrible smile. By this time tomorrow, your company will be seized, your accounts will be frozen, and you will be facing approximately 40 years in federal prison. Marcus lunged at William. It happened so fast that Emma barely had time to react. One moment, Marcus was standing there. The next, he was charging at the old man with murder in his eyes. He never made it. James intercepted him with brutal efficiency, catching Marcus mid-lunge and slamming him face first onto the dining table. Plates shattered. Wine glasses flew. Marcus screamed as his arm was wrenched behind his back. "Get off me!" he shrieked. "I'll kill you! I'll kill all of you!" Add assault to the charges, William said calmly. He hadn't even flinched. And threatening bodily harm. Emma stood frozen, watching her husband, her tormentor, pinned to his own dinner table like an insect. 4 years of fear. 4 years of walking on eggshells, of flinching at shadows, of believing she deserved every cruel word and every bruise. And now here he was, helpless and raging. completely powerless. Something broke loose inside her, something that had been caged for far too long. She walked forward. "Emma, help me!" Marcus twisted his head to look at her, his cheek pressed against the tablecloth. "Tell them this is all a mistake. Tell them I saved you. I gave you everything." Emma stopped beside the table, looking down at him. "You gave me nothing," she said quietly. "You took everything I had, my identity, my dignity, my self-worth. You made me believe I was worthless. You made me believe I deserved to be hit." "I never hit you that hard," Marcus whined. "I never—" "You told me I couldn't play piano. You said I had no talent, that the sound gave you migraines." Emma's voice was rising now, gaining strength. "But I remember now, Marcus. I remember sitting at a Steinway in Vienna. I remember playing Chopin while William listened. I remember being good at something. I remember being someone." She leaned down until her face was inches from his. "My name is not Emma. My name is Eleanor Ashford, and I am not your wife. I was never your wife. I was your prisoner." Marcus's face twisted with ugly rage. "You ungrateful bitch. I should have left you to rot in that hospital. I should have let you die in the gutter like the worthless—" Emma slapped him. The sound echoed through the silent room, a sharp crack that seemed to hang in the air. Marcus's head snapped to the side. A red handprint bloomed on his cheek. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Emma straightened up. She looked at her hand, then at Marcus, then at William. "I think," she said softly, "I'd like to go home now." William nodded. He walked over to her and offered his arm. "James, hold him until the authorities arrive. They should be here within the hour." "Yes, sir." They turned toward the shattered doorway, but before they could take a step, a voice rang out from the table. "Wait!" It was Vanessa. She had risen from her seat, her face a mask of calculating desperation. "Mr. Ashford, please, I can help you. I have information, evidence. I know where all the money went. I know about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, everything." She shot a venomous look at Marcus. "He made me do it. He threatened me. I was afraid for my life." "You lying whore!" Marcus screamed, struggling against James's grip. "You planned half of it. The quarterly reports were your idea." "That's not true." Vanessa's eyes filled with convenient tears. "He forced me. He said he'd destroy my career if I didn't cooperate. I'm a victim, just like her." Emma looked at Vanessa, at the woman who had laughed at her, mocked her, stolen her husband, and flaunted it openly. "You sat at this table and watched him abuse me," Emma said. "You called me an invalid. You said I shouldn't be allowed in public. And now you want sympathy?" "I didn't know," Vanessa pleaded. "I swear I didn't know about any of this. The kidnapping, the fraud. I thought you were just his crazy wife." "His crazy wife." Emma repeated the words flatly. "You thought he was justified in hitting me? In controlling me? In throwing me into a storm to die?" Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. She had no answer. William patted Emma's hand gently. "Let the authorities sort out her involvement. I suspect she'll find them less sympathetic than she hopes." They walked through the ruined doorway, past the splintered remains of the oak doors, out into the rain that had finally begun to ease into a light drizzle. Behind them, Emma could hear Marcus still screaming, threats, curses, promises of revenge. But the sound was already fading, becoming distant, becoming irrelevant. For the first time in 4 years, his voice didn't make her flinch. The Bentley was waiting. Warm air spilled out when the driver opened the door. Emma slid inside, and the heat wrapped around her like an embrace. William settled in beside her. He didn't speak. He just sat there, a steady presence, giving her space to process everything that had happened. Emma stared out the window as the convoy pulled away from the Blackwell estate. She watched the mansion grow smaller in the rear window, its lights still blazing, its occupants in chaos. "I don't remember everything," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have fragments, feelings. The name Eleanor sounds right, but I can't." "It's all right." William's voice was infinitely gentle. "The doctor said the memories might come back gradually, or they might not come back at all. Either way, it doesn't matter." "How can it not matter? If I can't remember our life together, then we'll make new memories." William reached over and took her hand. His grip was warm and steady, nothing like Marcus's bruising clutch. "I spent 5 years believing you were dead, Eleanor. 5 years, grieving. 5 years of silence in a house that used to be full of your music." His voice cracked slightly. "Having you back, even without the memories, is more than I ever dared to hope for." Emma looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Past the wealth, past the power, past the intimidating presence. She saw an old man who had loved his wife, who had never stopped searching, who had moved heaven and earth to find her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I'm Emma or Eleanor or someone else entirely." "You don't have to know right now." William squeezed her hand. "You don't have to be anything or anyone. Just rest. Heal. The rest will come." Emma nodded slowly. She was exhausted, physically, emotionally, spiritually drained. But underneath the exhaustion, something else was stirring. Freedom. For the first time in 4 years, she could breathe. The convoy drove through the night, leaving the Blackwell estate, leaving Marcus's screaming and Vanessa scheming, and all the broken pieces of a broken life far behind. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, was a new beginning. But Emma, Eleanor, knew that before she could fully embrace that beginning, she would have to face the past. She would have to remember. She would have to confront everything Marcus had taken from her. And she would have to make him pay. Not just with prison, not just with disgrace. She wanted him to see who she really was. She wanted him to know exactly what he had tried to destroy. And when she finally remembered everything, when she finally reclaimed her identity, she would walk into that courtroom and make sure Marcus Blackwell understood one thing with absolute clarity. He had never broken her. He had only made her stronger. The Bentley disappeared into the night, its taillights fading like dying stars. Behind them, the first police sirens began to wail, cutting through the storm. Marcus Blackwell's nightmare was just beginning. The Ashford estate emerged from the morning mist like something from a dream Eleanor couldn't quite remember. She had slept for 14 hours straight, the first real sleep she'd had in years. No fear of Marcus stumbling in drunk. No anxiety about what she might have done wrong. Just silence and warmth, and the softest bed she had ever felt. When she opened her eyes, she didn't know where she was. For one terrifying moment, she thought she was back in the Blackwell mansion, and her whole body tensed, bracing for the sound of Marcus's footsteps. Then she saw the sunlight streaming through windows that weren't covered with heavy drapes. She smelled lavender instead of Marcus's cologne. She heard birdsong instead of shouting. And she remembered. A soft knock came at the door. "Mrs. Ashford?" A woman's voice, gentle and hesitant.
"Are you awake? Mr. Ashford asked me to check on you."
Eleanor sat up slowly. Her throat still ached where Marcus had choked her, and her knees were bandaged where she'd scraped them on the driveway. But she was alive. She was free. "Come in," she said. The door opened to reveal a stout woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was carrying a tray with tea and toast. "I'm Mrs. Patterson," the woman said. setting the tray on the bedside table.
I've been the housekeeper here for 32 years.
Her voice trembled slightly. I was here when you and Mr. Ashford got married. I helped you pick out the flowers for the ceremony. Eleanor looked at her, searching for any spark of recognition. Nothing came. I'm sorry, Eleanor whispered. I don't remember. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled through them. That's all right, dear. That's perfectly all right. You're home now. That's all that matters. She bustled around the room, opening curtains, adjusting pillows, doing all the small things that Marcus had forbidden anyone from doing for Eleanor. Mr. Ashford is waiting for you downstairs whenever you're ready. No rush. He said to tell you there's no pressure, no expectations. He just wants to see you. Eleanor nodded. She sipped the tea, Earl Grey, her favorite, though she didn't know how she knew that, and tried to gather the courage to face whatever came next. An hour later, she made her way downstairs. The house was enormous, but it didn't feel cold like the Blackwell mansion. There were photographs everywhere, on walls, on tables, on shelves. Photographs of William and a woman who looked exactly like Eleanor. Photographs of travels, of celebrations, of ordinary moments captured in time. She stopped in front of one picture. It showed the woman, showed her, sitting at a grand piano, fingers poised over the keys, laughing at something the photographer had said. That was taken in Vienna. William's voice came from behind her. Our 5th anniversary. You had just finished playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The entire restaurant gave you a standing ovation. Eleanor turned to face him. In the daylight, he looked older than he had the night before. Tired, but his eyes were bright with cautious hope. I played in restaurants? You played everywhere. Concert halls, charity galas, living rooms, street corners. You said music wasn't meant to be locked away in fancy venues. It was meant to be shared. Eleanor looked back at the photograph. The woman in the picture was radiant, confident, alive. She bore no resemblance to the cowering creature Marcus had created. What happened to me? Eleanor asked quietly. Not the accident. Before that. Who was I? William gestured toward a sitting room. Come, sit. I'll tell you everything. They sat across from each other in comfortable chairs. Mrs. Patterson brought more tea, and William began to talk. He told her about their first meeting, at a charity concert where she was performing. He told her about their courtship, their wedding, their 23 years of marriage. He told her about her career as a pianist, her work with music education programs for underprivileged children, her laugh that could fill a room. He told her about the accident. We were driving through the Alps, he said, his voice heavy with old grief. A truck came around a blind curve. I swerved. The car went over the edge. He paused, staring at his hands. I woke up in a hospital 3 days later. They told me you had been swept away by the river. They searched for weeks, found nothing. His voice cracked. I buried an empty coffin, Eleanor. I stood at your grave and said goodbye to an empty box. I'm so sorry, Eleanor whispered. I can't imagine. Don't apologize. William looked up sharply. You have nothing to apologize for. You survived. Against all odds, you survived. The person who should apologize is rotting in a jail cell right now. At the mention of Marcus, Eleanor's whole body tensed. She hadn't asked about him. Part of her didn't want to know. What's happening with him? She asked. He was arrested last night, charged with fraud, embezzlement, bigamy, and false imprisonment. The FBI is investigating the wire transfers. The SEC is examining his company. William's expression hardened. His bail was set at $10 million. He couldn't make it. He's currently in a holding cell, awaiting arraignment. Good. The word came out before Eleanor could stop it. She was surprised by the venom in her own voice. William nodded approvingly. There's more. His lawyers are already trying to negotiate a plea deal. They know they can't win, but they're hoping to reduce his sentence by claiming he had a mental breakdown, that he genuinely believed he was helping a sick woman. That's a lie. Of course it is, but it's a lie that might get him 20 years instead of 40. William leaned forward, which is why I need to ask you something difficult. Eleanor braced herself.
What?
The prosecutor wants you to testify. They want you to tell the jury exactly what Marcus did to you. The isolation, the abuse, the manipulation. They want you to describe in detail what he put you through for 4 years. Eleanor's hands started to shake. The thought of facing Marcus again, of looking into those cold eyes, of speaking in front of strangers about the most degrading moments of her life. I know it's asking a lot, William said gently, and I will support whatever decision you make. If you can't do it, if it's too much, we'll find another way. My lawyers can build the case without your testimony. But your testimony would guarantee a conviction. Your testimony would ensure he never hurts anyone again. William reached over and took her trembling hands in his. You don't have to be a victim anymore, Eleanor. You can be a witness. You can be the one who brings him down. Eleanor closed her eyes. She thought about all the nights she'd spent crying in locked bathrooms. She thought about all the times Marcus had told her she was worthless, crazy, lucky to have him. She thought about the moment he'd thrown her into the storm and told her to die. She thought about the woman in the photograph, the woman she used to be. I'll do it, she said. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Eleanor's life. The memories came back slowly, painfully, like blood returning to a limb that had fallen asleep. Some came in dreams, vivid flashes of Vienna, of concert halls, of William's face when he was young. Others came unexpectedly, triggered by a smell, a sound, a particular slant of light. She remembered their wedding day. She remembered the feel of William's hands as they danced. She remembered being happy. But she also remembered the accident, the scream of tires, the sickening lurch as the car went over the edge, the cold, the darkness, the water. She woke up screaming more than once. The doctors came regularly, neurologists, psychologists, trauma specialists. They all said the same thing. Her recovery was remarkable, but it would take time, perhaps years, perhaps forever. Some memories might never return. Eleanor accepted this. She had to. The alternative was drowning in what she'd lost. Between medical appointments, she prepared for the trial. The prosecutor, a fierce woman named Patricia Vance, came to the estate twice a week to review Eleanor's testimony. Tell me about the first time he hit you, Patricia would say, her pen poised over her legal pad. And Eleanor would talk. She would describe the shock, the confusion, the way Marcus had apologized and promised it would never happen again. She would describe how the apologies had stopped coming, how the violence had become routine, how she had learned to make herself small and silent to avoid triggering his rage. Tell me about the isolation, Patricia would say. And Eleanor would talk about the phone Marcus had taken away, the friends he had forbidden her from seeing, the way he had convinced her that she had no one in the world but him. Tell me about the night he threw you out. And Eleanor would relive it, the hand around her throat, the guests watching, the rain, the cold, the moment she had truly believed she was going to die. Each session left her exhausted and raw, but each session also made her stronger. She wasn't telling her story as a victim. She was building a weapon. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon, 6 weeks after her rescue. Eleanor was wandering through the east wing of the house, a section she hadn't explored yet, when she found a door she didn't recognize. It was smaller than the others, tucked away at the end of a hallway. She opened it. Inside was a music room. A Steinway grand piano sat in the center, its lid open, its keys gleaming in the afternoon light. The room smelled of wood polish and old sheet music. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She walked toward the piano as if in a trance. Her fingers trembled as she reached out and touched the smooth wood. Marcus had told her she had no talent. He had forbidden her from playing, claiming the sound gave him migraines. After a while, she had stopped wanting to play. She had believed him when he said she was worthless. But now, standing before this beautiful instrument, she felt something stir in her chest. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. She sat down on the bench. The height felt familiar. The position of her hands felt natural. She didn't think. She just played. The music that poured from her fingers was Chopin, the Nocturne in E-flat major. She knew the piece by heart, though she had no memory of learning it. Her hands moved with a fluency and grace that shocked her. She wasn't clumsy. She wasn't talentless. She wasn't worthless. She was a pianist, a real one, and Marcus had almost made her forget. The music swelled, filling the room with its melancholy beauty. Eleanor closed her eyes and let it carry her away. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop playing. She played through the grief of lost years. She played through the rage of stolen identity. She played through the fear that still clutched at her heart every time she heard a door slam. She played until the last note faded into silence. When she opened her eyes, William was standing in the doorway. He was crying openly, making no effort to hide his tears. "That piece," he said, his voice breaking. "You played it at our wedding reception. It was the first song you ever played for me." Eleanor looked down at her hands, the same hands Marcus had called clumsy and useless. "I remember," she whispered. "William, I remember." He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest and sobbed, not with grief this time, but with relief. She was coming back. Piece by piece, memory by memory, she was finding herself again. And when the trial came, Marcus Blackwell was going to face the woman he had tried to destroy. Not the broken shell he had created. The real Eleanor Ashford. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in October. The courthouse was surrounded by reporters and cameras. The story had gone viral. The billionaire's wife, presumed dead, found alive after 5 years of captivity. Every news outlet in the country wanted a piece of it. Eleanor arrived in a black sedan with tinted windows. William sat beside her, holding her hand. "You don't have to do this," he said for the 100th time. "We can still—" "I'm doing it." Eleanor's voice was steady. "I need to do this. For myself." She stepped out of the car into a blinding flash of cameras. Questions were shouted from every direction. Security guards formed a protective barrier as she walked up the courthouse steps. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled. People lined the walls. Eleanor took her place in the witness section. She didn't look at the defense table. She couldn't. Not yet. But she could feel Marcus watching her. She could feel his eyes boring into her, radiating hatred. Let him watch, she thought. Let him see what he failed to break. The prosecution called its witnesses first. Forensic accountants testified about the wire fraud. FBI agents presented evidence of Marcus's multiple aliases. Hospital administrators from Lyon confirmed that a volunteer named Richard Sterling had disappeared around the same time as Jane Doe patient 7291. The case was airtight. The evidence was overwhelming. But the prosecution's star witness was Eleanor. "The people call Eleanor Ashford to the stand." Eleanor rose. Her legs were steady. Her hands didn't shake. She walked to the witness stand, took the oath, and sat down. For the first time, she allowed herself to look at Marcus. He had changed since that night. Prison had aged him. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His slick-back hair was disheveled. His face was gaunt. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, full of contempt. He thought he still had power over her. She could see it in the way he looked at her, like she was still his property, his possession, his victim. He was wrong. Patricia Vance, the prosecutor, approached the witness stand. "Mrs. Ashford, can you describe how you first met the defendant?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "I woke up in a hospital in Lyon, France. I had no memory of who I was, where I came from, or how I had gotten there. The doctors told me I had been found near a river with severe head trauma. I was a Jane Doe." "And the defendant?" "He was a volunteer at the hospital. He was kind to me. He brought me flowers and books. He held my hand when I was scared." Eleanor paused. "He told me his name was Richard Sterling. What happened next?" "He told me he had researched my case and discovered that I was an orphan with no family or friends. He said there was no one looking for me. He said I would probably spend the rest of my life in institutional care." "Was any of that true?" "No, none of it. He had found a locket around my neck with a family crest. He researched the crest and discovered it belonged to the Ashford family. He knew I was Eleanor Ashford. He knew I had a husband who was searching for me." Eleanor's voice hardened. "He chose to lie. What did he do then?" "He told me he wanted to take care of me. He said he had fallen in love with me. He convinced me to leave the hospital with him and come to England." Eleanor looked directly at Marcus. "He married me before my memory could return. He isolated me from the outside world. He controlled every aspect of my life." "Can you describe that control?" Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap. "He took away my phone. He monitored my emails. He forbade me from leaving the house without permission. He told me I was mentally ill, that I had delusions, that no one would believe anything I said." "Did he ever use physical violence against you?" The courtroom went silent. Eleanor looked at Marcus. He was staring at her with pure venom, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the edge of the defense table.
"Yes," she said clearly. "He hit me. He choked me. He dragged me by my hair. He told me it was my fault, that I provoked him, that I deserved it, that any other man would have done worse."
A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Someone in the gallery started crying. "Did you ever try to leave?"
"Once, 2 years ago. I made it to the front gate before his security guards brought me back."
Eleanor swallowed hard.
"That night, he explained what would happen if I ever tried to leave again.
He said he would make sure I disappeared. He said no one would ever find me. He said he knew people who could make someone vanish without a trace." "And you believed him?" "Yes, I believed everything he said. I had no one. I had nothing. I didn't even know my own name." Eleanor's voice cracked slightly, but she forced herself to continue. "I thought I was trapped forever. I thought I would die in that house." "Can you describe the night of September 14th? Eleanor closed her eyes. She let herself go back to that night, the dinner party, the humiliation, the storm.
He was hosting investors, important people. One of them asked me about his business plans. I told the truth. I said I didn't know anything about them because he never discussed business with me."
What was the defendant's response?
"He was furious. He grabbed me by the throat in front of everyone and slammed me against the wall. Then he dragged me to the front door and threw me out into the storm."
What were his exact words? Eleanor opened her eyes. She looked at Marcus with all the hatred and pain and rage she had buried for 4 years.
"He told me to die in the gutter where I belonged."
The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Marcus's defense attorney was on his feet, objecting to something, but his words were drowned out by the chaos. Through it all, Eleanor sat perfectly still on the witness stand. She had done it. She had faced him. She had told the truth. And Marcus Blackwell sat at the defense table, exposed for exactly what he was. A monster. A fraud. A coward. When the noise finally died down, the defense attorney rose for cross-examination. He was a slick man in an expensive suit, hired to do the impossible. Make Marcus Blackwell look sympathetic. Mrs. Ashford, he began smoothly, you've testified that you have significant memory loss. Is that correct? Yes. In fact, you didn't remember your own name until 6 weeks ago. Is that correct? Yes. So how can you be certain that your memories of the defendant are accurate? How do you know you're not, as my client suggested, experiencing delusions? Eleanor smiled coldly. Because I have photographs of my injuries. I have medical records documenting the abuse. I have witnesses who saw your client throw me into a storm and tell me to die. She leaned forward slightly. And I have 5 years of bank records showing your client stealing money from my husband while telling him I was dead. Those aren't delusions, counselor. Those are facts. The defense attorney's face tightened. No further questions. Eleanor stepped down from the witness stand. She walked past the defense table, close enough to touch Marcus. He grabbed her wrist. You'll regret this, he hissed. I'll get out someday. And when I do... Security guards were on him instantly, wrestling him back into his seat. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She looked down at the man who had terrorized her for 4 years. No, Marcus, she said softly. You won't. She pulled her wrist free and walked away. Behind her, Marcus Blackwell was screaming threats and obscenities as guards restrained him. The judge was calling for order. The courtroom was in chaos. But Eleanor didn't look back. She was done looking back. The trial continued for 3 more days after Eleanor's testimony. She didn't return to the courtroom. She didn't need to. William kept her updated on every development, and she watched the news coverage from the safety of the Ashford estate. The prosecution called witness after witness. Former employees of Nexus Technologies testified about falsified reports and missing funds. Bank officials presented records of wire transfers that traced directly to Marcus's personal accounts. A forensic handwriting expert confirmed that Marcus had forged Eleanor's signature on dozens of documents. But the most damaging testimony came from someone Eleanor never expected. Vanessa Moore. The woman who had mocked Eleanor at dinner parties, who had flaunted her affair with Marcus, who had called her an invalid who shouldn't be allowed in public. That woman took the stand and destroyed Marcus completely. Eleanor watched the live coverage from her sitting room, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. Ms. Moore, the prosecutor began, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Vanessa sat rigidly in the witness chair. Gone was the confident seductress in the red dress. She looked pale and thin, her eyes darting nervously around the courtroom. I was his chief financial officer, Vanessa said, and his romantic partner. For how long? 3 years. During that time, were you aware of the defendant's treatment of his wife? Vanessa's hands twisted in her lap. Yes. Can you describe what you witnessed? I saw him hit her, multiple times. I saw him grab her by the hair and drag her across the floor. I saw him lock her in a room for days without food because she had spoken to a delivery man. Vanessa's voice cracked. I saw everything. And you said nothing? He told me she was mentally ill. He told me the violence was necessary to control her episodes. He told me... Vanessa broke off, tears streaming down her face. He told me I was the one he really loved. He told me that as soon as he figured out how to access her family money, he would divorce her and marry me. Did you believe him? Yes. God help me, I believed everything he said. Ms. Moore, Did you participate in the financial crimes the defendant is accused of? Vanessa closed her eyes.
Yes. I helped him falsify the quarterly reports. I helped him set up the offshore accounts. I helped him create the shell companies that hid the stolen funds.
Why are you testifying against him now? Vanessa opened her eyes and looked directly at Marcus. Her expression shifted from fear to something harder, something that looked almost like hatred. Because when he was arrested, the first thing he did was tell the FBI that everything was my idea. He said I had manipulated him.
He said he was the victim.
Her voice rose with bitter fury.
I gave him 3 years of my life. I helped him steal millions. I watched him abuse that woman and said nothing. And the second it became convenient, he threw me away like garbage.
She turned back to the prosecutor.
Marcus Blackwell doesn't love anyone but himself. He uses people until they're no longer useful, and then he destroys them. I'm not going to prison alone while he walks free. Not anymore.
Eleanor set down her tea. Her hands were shaking. She should have felt satisfaction watching Vanessa crumble. She should have felt vindicated hearing the woman who had laughed at her suffering, now weeping on the witness stand. Instead, she felt something closer to pity. Vanessa had been fooled too. Not in the same way. She had been complicit in Marcus's crimes, had actively participated in his cruelty. But she had also believed his lies. She had also thought she was special, that she was the exception, that he would treat her differently. She had learned the truth the same way everyone learned the truth about Marcus Blackwell. Too late. The defense tried to recover. Marcus's attorney called character witnesses, business associates who praised his leadership, distant relatives who described a difficult childhood, a psychologist who suggested that Marcus suffered from a personality disorder that diminished his culpability. None of it worked. The evidence was too overwhelming. The witnesses were too credible. And Marcus himself had destroyed any remaining sympathy by attacking Eleanor in the courtroom. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Eleanor was in the music room when William came to find her. She was playing Beethoven, the Moonlight Sonata, one of the first pieces she had fully remembered. The music helped her think, helped her process, helped her feel something other than the constant low-grade anxiety that still hummed beneath her skin. Eleanor. She stopped playing and turned to face her husband. His expression told her everything she needed to know. The verdict is in, William said. They drove to the courthouse together. Eleanor wore a simple navy dress, not the faded rag Marcus had forced her to wear, but an elegant piece that fit her perfectly. She had chosen it deliberately. She wanted Marcus to see her. She wanted him to see the woman he had tried to destroy, standing tall and whole and free. The courtroom was packed even tighter than before. Every seat was filled, every wall lined with spectators and reporters. The air crackled with anticipation. Eleanor and William took their seats in the front row of the gallery. She could feel Marcus's eyes on her from the defense table, but she didn't look at him. She kept her gaze fixed on the judge's bench. All rise. The judge entered and took his seat. He was an older man with a stern face and sharp eyes, the kind of judge who had seen too much to be impressed by wealth or status. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. He was a middle-aged man in a plain suit, his face unreadable. We have, Your Honor. On the count of wire fraud, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Eleanor heard Marcus's sharp intake of breath. On the count of embezzlement, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the count of securities fraud, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the count of bigamy, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the count of false imprisonment, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the count of identity theft, How do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the count of assault causing bodily harm, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. 7 counts. 7 guilty verdicts. Each one landed like a hammer blow. Eleanor watched Marcus's face as the verdicts were read. She watched the color drain from his skin. She watched his arrogant mask finally, completely shatter. He looked old. He looked broken. He looked like exactly what he was, a small, cruel man whose entire life had been built on lies, and whose lies had finally caught up with him. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them. He turned to Marcus. "Mr. Blackwell, you have been found guilty on all counts. Sentencing will take place in 2 weeks. Until then, you will remain in custody without bail." He paused. "Given the severity of your crimes and your behavior during this trial, I intend to recommend the maximum sentence on each count to be served consecutively." Marcus's attorney jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, my client—" "Sit down, counselor." The judge's voice was ice. "Your client had every opportunity to show remorse, to cooperate with authorities, to demonstrate some shred of human decency. Instead, he threatened a witness in open court and continues to maintain his innocence despite overwhelming evidence." He looked at Marcus with undisguised contempt. "The court has heard enough from Mr. Blackwell." Marcus stood up suddenly, knocking his chair backward. "This is a setup," he screamed. "That old man paid everyone off. She's lying. She's always been a liar. I saved her. I gave her everything. She would be nothing without me." Security guards moved toward him, but Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to Eleanor, his face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? You think this is over? I'll get out someday, Eleanor, and when I do, I'll find you. I'll make you wish you had died in that river. I'll make you—" The guards reached him. They forced him down, cuffing his hands behind his back. He continued to scream threats and obscenities as they dragged him toward the side door. Eleanor stood up. "Marcus!" Her voice cut through the chaos, clear, calm, strong. Marcus stopped struggling. The guards paused. The entire courtroom fell silent. Eleanor walked forward until she was standing just a few feet from the man who had stolen 4 years of her life. "You told me I was nothing," she said quietly. "Every single day for 4 years. You told me I was worthless, stupid, crazy. You told me no one would ever want me. You told me I was lucky to have you." She stepped closer. "I believed you. I believed every word. I forgot who I was because of you. I forgot my own name. I forgot that I had a husband who loved me, a life that mattered, a talent that brought joy to thousands of people." Her voice hardened. "You tried to erase me, Marcus. You tried to turn me into a ghost." She leaned in until her face was inches from his. But ghosts don't testify in courtrooms. Ghosts don't remember. Ghosts don't survive. She smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. "I'm not a ghost, Marcus. I'm the woman you tried to destroy, and I'm still standing." She straightened up and looked at the guards. "Take him away." They dragged Marcus through the side door. His screams echoed through the corridor, growing fainter and fainter until they finally disappeared. Eleanor turned back to face the courtroom. Every eye was on her. Reporters were furiously scribbling notes. Spectators were openly crying. William was waiting for her at the gallery railing. His eyes were bright with tears, but he was smiling, the biggest, proudest smile she had ever seen. "Let's go home," Eleanor said. 2 weeks later, Marcus Blackwell was sentenced to 43 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Eleanor didn't attend the sentencing. She didn't need to. She had said everything she needed to say. She had looked her monster in the eye and walked away whole. Instead, she spent that day at the Ashford estate, in the music room, playing piano. The memories were still coming back. Not all at once. The doctors had warned her that some might never return, but in steady streams that filled in the blank spaces of her past. She remembered her childhood in Boston, her studies at Juilliard, her first professional performance at Carnegie Hall. She remembered meeting William at that charity concert, remembered the way he had looked at her, like she was the most remarkable thing he had ever seen. She remembered being happy. And slowly, carefully, she was learning to be happy again. The nightmares still came sometimes. She still flinched at loud noises. She still caught herself asking permission before doing simple things, going for a walk, choosing what to eat, playing a song she wanted to play. But every day, those reflexes grew weaker. Every day, she reclaimed another piece of herself. Mrs. Patterson knocked on the music room door. "Mrs. Ashford, there's someone here to see you." Eleanor stopped playing. "Who is it?" "She says her name is Sarah Chen. She says she was a nurse at St. Jude's Hospital in Lyon." Eleanor's heart skipped. St. Jude's, the hospital where she had woken up with no memory. The hospital where Marcus had found her. "Send her in." The woman who entered was small and slight, with dark hair streaked with gray and kind eyes that seemed to carry a permanent sadness. She was holding a manila envelope. "Mrs. Ashford," Sarah's voice trembled slightly, "I'm so sorry to intrude. I saw the trial on the news and I had to come." "Please, sit down," Eleanor gestured to a chair. "How did you know me?" Sarah sat, clutching the envelope in her lap like a lifeline. "I was your primary nurse for 6 months. I was there when you woke up from the coma. I was there when you said your first words, took your first steps, learned to eat again." She wiped her eyes. "I watched you fight so hard to recover, even though you had no idea who you were or why you should bother trying." "I don't remember you," Eleanor admitted. "I'm sorry." "That's all right. You didn't remember anyone back then." Sarah took a shaky breath. "But I remember you. And I remember him." "Marcus?" "He called himself Richard Sterling. He was a volunteer, came in 3 times a week, supposedly to help with patient care. But he always ended up in your room." Sarah's expression darkened. "I didn't trust him. There was something wrong about the way he looked at you, the way he studied you, like you were a puzzle he was trying to solve." "Did you say anything?" "I tried. I told my supervisor I thought he was too interested in you, that his behavior seemed inappropriate. But she said I was being paranoid. He was charming, you see. He knew exactly how to make people like him." Sarah opened the envelope with trembling hands. "Then one day, you were gone. He had convinced you to leave the hospital against medical advice. By the time I got to your room, you were already in his car." She pulled out a photograph and held it out to Eleanor. It was a picture of Eleanor in a hospital bed. She was thin and pale, her hair cropped short, her eyes confused and lost. Around her neck was a platinum chain with a locket. "Your locket," Sarah said. "That's how I knew something was wrong. You never took it off. Even in your sleep, your hand would drift to it, like you were protecting it. But the day you left, you weren't wearing it." "Marcus pawned it." Eleanor's voice was flat. "He sold it before we even left France." "I know. I spent years looking for it. I thought if I could find the locket, I could trace it back to him, prove that something was wrong." Sarah's hands shook. "But I'm just a nurse. I didn't have the resources to investigate properly. I tried contacting police, missing persons organizations, anyone who would listen. No one believed me." "Why not?" "Because you left voluntarily. Because he had paperwork showing he was your legal guardian. Because I had no evidence of wrongdoing. Just a feeling." Sarah's voice broke. "I failed you, Mrs. Ashford.
I watched a predator take you away, and I couldn't stop him."
Eleanor looked at the photograph, at the lost woman she had been, at the locket she had loved without knowing why. "You didn't fail me," Eleanor said softly. "You tried. That's more than anyone else did. I've never stopped thinking about you, wondering what happened to you, praying that somehow, somewhere, you were okay." Sarah wiped her eyes. "When I saw the news coverage, when I learned the truth about what he did, I had to come. I had to tell you that someone tried to help, that you weren't completely alone, even then." Eleanor reached out and took Sarah's hand. "Thank you," she said, "for trying, for remembering, for being here now." Sarah squeezed her hand and sobbed with relief. They talked for hours. Sarah filled in the gaps in Eleanor's memory, the months of recovery, the small victories and devastating setbacks, the gradual emergence of personality from the blank slate of amnesia. "You loved music," Sarah said. "Even before you remembered being a pianist, you would hum to yourself, little melodies that seemed to come from nowhere. One of the other nurses brought in a keyboard just to see what would happen. You sat down and played Für Elise without missing a note." "I don't remember that." "You cried afterward. You didn't know why you knew how to play. You didn't understand where the music was coming from." Sarah smiled through her tears. "I told you it didn't matter where it came from." "What mattered was that it was beautiful, and it was yours." Eleanor looked at the piano. She thought about all the nights Marcus had forbidden her from playing, all the times he had told her she had no talent, all the years she had believed him. "It was always mine," she said quietly. "He just made me forget." Sarah left as the sun was setting. Eleanor walked her to the door, embraced her, promised to stay in touch. "Take care of yourself," Sarah said. "You deserve every happiness in the world." Eleanor watched the car drive away until its taillights disappeared into the twilight. William found her still standing at the door, staring at the darkening sky. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Eleanor turned to face him. Her husband, the man who had never stopped searching for her, never stopped believing she was alive. "I spent 4 years thinking I was alone," she said. "I thought no one cared about me. No one remembered me. No one would ever come looking for me. You were never alone. You were never forgotten. I know that now." Eleanor took his hand. "Marcus told me so many lies. He told me I was worthless, that I had no one, that I was lucky he had taken pity on me. And I believed him, because I didn't know any better. And now?" Eleanor looked back at the driveway, where Sarah's car had disappeared. She thought about the nurse who had tried to save her. She thought about William, who had spent 5 years and $100 million trying to find her. She thought about Mrs. Patterson, who had cried with joy when Eleanor came home. "Now I know the truth," Eleanor said. "I was never worthless. I was never forgotten. I was just lost for a while." She squeezed William's hand. "But I'm home now." William pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "Yes," he whispered against her hair. "You're home." 1 year passed. Eleanor stood in front of the full-length mirror in her dressing room, adjusting the collar of her emerald gown. The woman staring back at her was almost unrecognizable from the trembling creature Marcus had thrown into the storm. Her hair was styled elegantly, swept up to reveal the diamond earrings William had given her for their anniversary. Their real anniversary, not the fake one Marcus had invented. Her eyes were clear and bright, no longer clouded with fear and confusion. Her posture was straight, her shoulders back, her chin lifted. She looked like Eleanor Ashford. She felt like Eleanor Ashford. "You look stunning." William appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his tuxedo. Even at 78, he carried himself with the vigor of a much younger man. The past year had been good to him too. The lines of grief that had carved his face for 5 years had softened, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. I'm nervous, Eleanor admitted. I haven't performed in public since before the accident. What if I've forgotten how? What if I freeze up there? William walked over and took her hands. Do you remember what you told me the night before your debut at Carnegie Hall? Eleanor searched her memory. The concert had been 30 years ago, but the moment surfaced like a bubble rising to the surface of still water. I said I was terrified, she whispered. I said I was going to humiliate myself in front of 2,000 people. And what did I say? You said, Eleanor smiled at the memory. You said the only person I needed to impress was myself. You said the music would take care of the rest. The music always takes care of the rest. William squeezed her hands. You've been playing every day for a year. You've remembered pieces you learned 30 years ago. You've written new compositions that make Mrs. Patterson cry every time she hears them. He lifted her chin gently. You are Eleanor Ashford. You were born to do this. Eleanor took a deep breath. He was right. She had spent a year preparing for this moment. Not just practicing the music, but rebuilding herself from the ground up. Therapy sessions to process the trauma. Medical appointments to monitor her neurological recovery. Long conversations with William about the life they had shared before the accident. And through it all, the music. Always the music. She had started with simple pieces. For Elise, Claire de Lune. The gentle melodies that had survived even Marcus's systematic destruction of her identity. Then she had moved on to more challenging works. Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Liszt. Each piece she mastered was a piece of herself reclaimed. But tonight was different. Tonight wasn't about reclaiming the past. Tonight was about proving that Marcus Blackwell had failed. Let's go, Eleanor said. I have a concert to perform. The grand ballroom of the Kensington Hotel was filled to capacity. 500 guests had paid $10,000 each to attend the inaugural gala of the Eleanor Ashford Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping survivors of domestic abuse find legal aid, safe housing, and mental health support. The guest list included politicians, celebrities, business leaders, and dozens of women who had reached out to Eleanor over the past year to share their own stories of survival. Eleanor had read every letter, every email, every message. She had wept over stories that mirrored her own. Women who had been isolated by their abusers, gaslit into believing they were crazy, convinced they had no one in the world who cared about them. She had written back to as many as she could. She had connected them with resources, with support groups, with lawyers who could help them escape. She had used the Ashford fortune, her fortune she had finally accepted, to fund shelters and hotlines and legal defense funds. But tonight was the biggest step yet. Tonight, the foundation would launch publicly. Tonight, Eleanor would stand before 500 people and tell her story. And then, she would play. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of the Eleanor Ashford Foundation, Mrs. Eleanor Ashford. Applause erupted as Eleanor walked onto the stage. She moved slowly, deliberately, letting the sound wash over her. A year ago, this many eyes on her would have made her want to disappear. Marcus had trained her to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, to never draw attention to herself. But Marcus was in prison, and Eleanor was done being invisible. She reached the podium and looked out at the crowd. 500 faces looked back at her, curious, supportive, waiting. Thank you all for being here tonight, Eleanor began. Her voice was steady, amplified by the microphone, but needing no artificial enhancement. When I first started planning this event, I wasn't sure I could go through with it. Public speaking was never my strength. I've always preferred to let the music speak for me. A gentle ripple of laughter moved through the audience. But tonight, I need to use my own words. Because the story I'm going to tell you isn't about music. It's about silence. It's about what happens when someone steals your voice and convinces you it was never worth hearing. The room went completely still. 5 years ago, I was in a car accident in Switzerland. I lost my memory. Completely, totally, utterly. I woke up in a hospital bed with no idea who I was, where I came from, or if anyone in the world was looking for me. Eleanor paused, letting the weight of the words settle. A man found me in that hospital. A man who saw a vulnerable woman with no identity and no protection, and decided to take advantage of her. He convinced me that I was alone, that I was worthless, that I was lucky he had decided to save me. He married me before my memory could return, and then he spent 4 years systematically destroying everything I was. She heard sharp intakes of breath throughout the audience. Some of them had followed the trial coverage. Some of them knew the broad strokes of the story. But hearing it from Eleanor's own lips was different. He told me I couldn't play piano. He said the sound gave him migraines, that I had no talent, that I was embarrassing myself every time I touched a keyboard. Eleanor's voice hardened. I believed him. I stopped playing. I stopped singing. I stopped humming. I made myself as small and silent as possible, because that was what he demanded. She looked out at the audience and found Sarah Chen sitting in the third row. The nurse who had tried to save her was crying openly. I'm not telling you this to ask for sympathy. I'm telling you this because I know I'm not alone. There are millions of women and men who are living the same nightmare right now. They're being told they're worthless. They're being isolated from everyone who loves them. They're being convinced that the abuse is their fault, that they deserve it, that no one will ever believe them if they try to speak up. Eleanor gripped the podium. I'm here tonight to tell every single one of those people, you are not alone. You are not worthless. And your voice matters. The applause that followed was thunderous. Eleanor waited for it to subside, then continued. The Eleanor Ashford Foundation exists because I was lucky. I had a husband who never stopped searching for me. I had resources most survivors can only dream of. I had people who believed me when I finally found the courage to speak up. She shook her head. But luck shouldn't be a requirement for survival. Every person trapped in an abusive relationship deserves legal help, safe housing, and someone who believes them. That's what this foundation will provide. She gestured to the screens behind her, which displayed statistics, testimonials, and information about the foundation's programs. We're launching tonight with 3 initiatives. First, a network of emergency shelters across the country, where survivors can find safety at any hour of the day or night. Second, a legal defense fund that will provide free representation to anyone seeking protection orders or pursuing criminal charges against their abusers. Third, a mental health program that will offer long-term therapy and support groups for survivors rebuilding their lives. More applause. Eleanor waited for it to fade. I spent 4 years in silence. Tonight, I'm breaking that silence, not just for myself, but for everyone who can't speak yet. And I'm going to do it the only way I know how. She stepped away from the podium and walked toward the Steinway grand piano that dominated the center of the stage. This piece is called Finding Home. I wrote it over the past year during my recovery. It's dedicated to everyone who has ever felt lost, broken, and beyond saving. She sat down at the keyboard and looked out at the audience one more time. You are not beyond saving. You are never beyond saving. She began to play. The music started softly, tentative notes that seemed to search for something, reaching out into empty space. It sounded like confusion, like fear, like waking up in a hospital bed with no idea who you are. Then the melody shifted. The searching notes found each other, began to weave together, creating patterns that were hesitant at first, but gradually grew more confident. It sounded like memory returning, like fragments of identity piecing themselves back together. Eleanor closed her eyes and let the music carry her. She thought about the hospital in Lyon, the blank white walls, the face she didn't recognize in the mirror, the terror of existing without a past. She thought about Marcus, the charming smile that hid a monster, the hands that had once held her gently and later wrapped around her throat, the voice that had whispered poison into her ear for 4 years, telling her she was nothing, she was worthless, she was lucky to have him. The music grew darker. Discordant notes crept in, disrupting the fragile melody. It sounded like abuse, like manipulation, like being trapped in a beautiful house that was really a prison. Eleanor's fingers flew across the keys, channeling every moment of fear and pain and despair into the music. She played the nights spent crying in locked bathrooms. She played the terror of Marcus's footsteps in the hallway. She played the moment he had thrown her into the storm and told her to die. The audience was transfixed. Some were weeping openly. Others sat frozen, unable to look away from the woman at the piano who was pouring her soul into every note. Then the music shifted again. The discordant notes began to resolve. The fragmented melody found itself, grew stronger, more confident. It sounded like rescue, like William's face in the rain, like hearing your real name for the first time in 5 years. Eleanor played the moment she had slapped Marcus in front of his dinner guests. She played the first time she had sat at the Steinway in the Ashford Music Room and remembered how to play Chopin. She played the day she had stood in front of the mirror and finally recognized the woman staring back at her. The music built and built, layering triumph over trauma, hope over despair, strength over fear. It swelled into something magnificent, a full-throated declaration that she had survived. She had reclaimed herself. She had won. The final notes rang out through the ballroom, hanging in the air like a promise. Silence. Then the audience erupted. 500 people rose to their feet, applauding and cheering and crying. The sound was deafening, a wave of love and support and admiration that crashed over Eleanor and left her breathless. She stood up from the piano, her own cheeks wet with tears, and took a bow. William was waiting for her at the edge of the stage. He pulled her into his arms the moment she reached him. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," he whispered against her hair. "I am so proud of you." Eleanor held him tight. Over his shoulder, she could see the audience, still standing, still applauding, some of them reaching for their phones to donate to the foundation, others simply absorbing the moment. She had done it. She had taken everything Marcus had tried to destroy and turned it into something powerful, something meaningful, something that would help others escape the nightmare she had survived. The gala continued for hours after Eleanor's performance. She spoke with donors, posed for photographs, accepted congratulations and hugs from strangers who had been moved by her story. Several women approached her quietly, sharing their own experiences in hushed voices, asking how they could get help for themselves or someone they loved. Eleanor gave each of them her personal email address. She promised to follow up. She meant it. By the time the last guest departed, it was well past midnight. Eleanor kicked off her heels and collapsed onto a sofa in the green room, exhausted but exhilarated. "We raised $4 million tonight," William reported, sinking into the chair beside her. "That's enough to fund the foundation's operations for 2 years." $4 million, Eleanor repeated. "That's $4 million worth of safe houses and lawyers and therapists. That's $4 million worth of women getting help. And it's just the beginning." William reached over and took her hand. "This is going to grow, Eleanor. You're going to help thousands of people." Eleanor leaned back and closed her eyes. She thought about the long road that had brought her to this moment, The accident, the amnesia, the 4 years of captivity, the rescue, the trial, the recovery. She thought about Marcus, rotting in a prison cell, stripped of everything he had valued, his reputation, his wealth, his power. And she thought about herself, the woman she had been before the accident, confident, talented, loved. The shell Marcus had reduced her to, fearful, broken, voiceless. And the person she had become now, stronger than she had ever been, forged in fire, unbreakable. "Do you know what I keep thinking about?" she said softly. "What?" "That night, the night he threw me out." Eleanor opened her eyes and looked at William. "When I was lying in the rain, I prayed for it to end. I wanted to die, William. I thought death was the only escape." William's hand tightened around hers. "And then you appeared, out of nowhere, in the middle of a storm, like something from a dream." Eleanor smiled. "If you had arrived 5 minutes later, I might have given up. I might have let the cold take me." "But I didn't arrive 5 minutes later." "No, you didn't." Eleanor sat up and faced her husband. "I've spent a lot of time wondering why. Why I survived the accident. Why I survived Marcus. Why everything happened the way it did." "Did you find an answer?" Eleanor thought about Sarah Chen, the nurse who had tried to save her and carried the guilt for 5 years. She thought about the women at the gala who had shared their stories, desperate for someone to believe them. She thought about all the survivors who would find help through the foundation she had created. "I think I did," she said. "I survived because I was supposed to do this. Not just recover my own life, but help others recover theirs. Everything I went through, the accident, the amnesia, Marcus, it all led me here, to this moment, to this purpose." William studied her face for a long moment. Then he smiled. The same smile he had worn the night they first met, 30 years ago. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you would have found your purpose no matter what. The accident didn't make you strong, Eleanor. Marcus didn't make you strong. You were always strong. You just forgot for a while." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you, William. I love you too. I never stopped. Not for a single day in 5 years." They sat together in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the cleaning crew dismantle the gala decorations. Outside the windows, the city lights sparkled like earthbound stars. "What now?" William asked eventually. Eleanor considered the question. A year ago, she had no idea who she was or what she wanted. Now she had reclaimed her identity, her music, her marriage, and her purpose. But she wasn't finished. "Now we build," she said. "We expand the foundation. We open more shelters. We hire more lawyers. We help more people." She squeezed William's hand. "And I keep playing. I want to perform again, really perform. Concerts, recordings, everything I did before the accident. The world has missed your music. The world is going to get a lot more of it." Eleanor stood up, suddenly energized despite the late hour. "I spent 4 years being told I had no talent. I spent 4 years believing I was worthless. Now I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving Marcus Blackwell wrong." William rose to join her. "And I'll be right beside you, every step of the way." They walked out of the hotel together, arm in arm, into the cool night air. The limousine was waiting, but Eleanor paused on the sidewalk. "Can we walk for a bit?" she asked. "Just a few blocks. I want to feel the night." William nodded. They dismissed the driver and strolled down the quiet street, past closed shops and empty cafes, under streetlights that cast pools of gold onto the pavement. Eleanor breathed in deeply. The air smelled like rain. A storm was coming, but she wasn't afraid of storms anymore. "I keep thinking about what you said that night," she murmured, "when you found me on the side of the road." What did I say?
You said, "She is my wife." 4 words. That's all it took to change everything.
William stopped walking and turned to face her. Those 4 words were the truest thing I've ever said. You are my wife, Eleanor. You always were. Marcus could never change that. Nothing could change that. Eleanor looked up at the sky, where dark clouds were gathering. She remembered another storm, the one that had nearly killed her, that had driven her to her knees on a cold driveway, that had made her pray for death. But that woman was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had walked through fire and emerged forged rather than burned. I'm not Emma anymore, Eleanor said quietly. I haven't been Emma for a long time. But I'm not exactly the old Eleanor either. The woman I was before the accident. She doesn't exist anymore. Does that bother you? Eleanor considered the question. She thought about all she had lost. Years of memories, experiences, moments that would never come back. She thought about the life Marcus had stolen from her. But she also thought about what she had gained. Resilience she didn't know she possessed. A purpose that gave her life meaning. An appreciation for every single day that the old Eleanor had taken for granted.
No, she said finally. It doesn't bother me. I'm someone new. Someone shaped by everything that happened, the good and the bad. And I think, she smiled, I think I like who I'm becoming. The first drops of rain began to fall. William opened the umbrella he had been carrying and held it over both of them. They continued walking, sheltered from the storm, together. You know what the best part is? Eleanor asked. What? He thought he broke me. Marcus genuinely believed he had destroyed me. He threw me into a storm and walked away, convinced I would die. Eleanor laughed, a real laugh, full of joy and triumph. He had no idea that the storm was exactly what I needed to find my way home. William pulled her closer. The storm led you to me. The storm led me back to myself. They walked on through the rain, leaving the gala behind, leaving the past behind, stepping into a future that Eleanor had once believed was impossible. Behind them, in a federal prison hundreds of miles away, Marcus Blackwell sat alone in a cell, stripped of his wealth, his reputation, and his freedom. He would spend the next 4 decades there, surrounded by concrete walls and iron bars, haunted by the memory of the woman he had tried to destroy. He had called her worthless. He had called her nothing. He had thrown her into a storm and told her to die. But Eleanor Ashford had survived. She had remembered. She had risen. And now, walking through the rain, with the husband who had never stopped loving her, she finally understood the truth that Marcus had tried so hard to bury. She had never been nothing. She had always been everything. And no storm, not Marcus, not amnesia, not 4 years of abuse, could ever take that away. The rain fell harder, but Eleanor didn't flinch. She had walked through worse storms than this. She had survived worse nights than this. She was Eleanor Ashford, pianist, survivor, founder, wife. And she was finally, completely, unbreakably home.